My name is Tatiana Koval, and today we have a very interesting, very brilliant guest, and I'm expected for this meeting for a longer time because I know what our meeting today will be full of a lot of insights, and because we will speak not only about talent attraction, about hiring, but we will speak also about humans and human touch. My guest today is Craig Fisher. Hi, Craig.
Hi, Tatiana. How are you doing? Good to see you.
Me too. So, Craig, before we starting, could you make a short introduction about your professional background or maybe any personal topics which you want to share with our audience?
Yes, absolutely. So, after a brilliant early career in healthcare sales, I got recruited into the recruiting business in the mid to late 90s, and then did every job you can imagine in staffing firm and agency management, executive search firm ownership. And then eventually, I started having a lot of opinions on the topics of recruiting and social media, talent attraction, and brand strategy on places like LinkedIn and Twitter, and started getting asked to come speak at corporate kickoffs, sales events, and recruiting strategy fireside chats for big teams globally. And that became a consulting business. So since 2011, I've run TalentNet Media, which is a consultancy to employers large and small. And we fix talent operations, talent attraction, and candidate experience issues that involve both process improvement and technology improvement. For a while, I was the CMO and led consulting strategy at Allegis Global Solutions, which is owned by Allegis Group, the world's largest human talent operations company. And I have enjoyed very much also being an advisor to multiple HR technology firms who underwrite a conference that we've hosted twice a year in Texas called TalentNet Live since 2009. So this is where we all come together and talk about the fun case studies that I do with the employers, and we introduce the tech strategy companies and HR tech companies all together in the same room as colleagues. And we'll have our next event in Chicago on June 2nd. And then we'll be in Dallas again November 7th.
Awesome. It's so great what the people could visit some of your events live. But I think you also were active online and these different events as a speaker. And I think it's also because you have a huge expertise. For me, we are one of the best experts in HR marketing. But before we start to go in your professional sphere of HR marketing, I want to start from your books. And I like the name of your books, Hiring Humans. And thirdly, I want to ask you, what does it mean for you, especially today in the world of AI? Could you make us an explanation of your approach for hiring?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2017, while I was with Allegis, we worked with a company called DXC Technology. It's a big tech company, and we implemented the first instance of Paradox, which was it's a big chatbot, right, for recruiting on a corporate careers page. And I thought at the time, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. We did some research, and I polled job candidates to see if they had any problem working with a chatbot on the sort of early stages of a job application, right? Getting some of the bits and pieces out of the way before they speak to a person. Well, most people said they didn't have a problem with doing that as long as they did eventually get to speak to a person. And when we put that chatbot on the DXC site, the first thing everyone asked was basically speak to a recruiter. So we realized at the time there was going to have to be a blend. It couldn't just be technology to remove all the friction. And at this point, we've sort of removed too much friction. People don't think it's real, right? If you just sail through an easy apply, but then you don't really get much in the way of human response, it doesn't feel real. And so there needs to be some friction and some human intervention and touch involved.
When we talk about HR marketing, about humans, usually I remember in marketing operations, the big segments, the segments of candidates, and looking for the people, not from a people perspective, not from a human perspective, but for the perspective as a candidate, as something part of this segment. What is your approach? How could you what could you recommend for people in the companies how to see the real person behind the segment, behind the neural segmentation?
So, it's interesting. There's two sides of this, right? And I've written another book. Is it here? It's here. Paint Your Store. This is book number 2. So there's book number 1 back there, Hiring Humans. And Paint Your Store is the candidate side of that whole equation. And there's a whole chapter about it that talks about how the applicant tracking system is not your enemy, right? And so, on one side, candidates think, well, I've got to optimize my resume for this applicant tracking system that's doing all this automation. And I have to match all my keywords to the exact job. Well, on the employer side, that makes it very difficult because now your job descriptions generally are not optimized for that matching. Your process is certainly not equipped to handle the hundreds of resumes that all look very much alike at this point, right? So how do you see through all the clutter to who's real? And so that includes in introducing, right, some knockout questions and some human interaction, because you can't really just rely on AI matching for your entire process. You're bound to lose several of the best possible candidates in that process if you do.
Mhm. I want to ask about the balance between human side and the balance between using AI. And we talk about HR marketing. Now we talk about the content which we usually, as HR, generate for promoting our company, for promoting our vacancy, for building our employer brand. And now a lot of companies use AI. And from one side, we understand that we have a lot of algorithms which help us from one side, but also which make a problem. For example, when you're visiting for Medium as a source, you could see what a lot of context optimized from a perspective of the algorithm, but
That's
it's
right.
not about humans. It's not how usually we prefer to work with information. Could you give a recommendation for companies, for employer brand managers? What is the best approach for creating the real human-oriented content?
Right. So when you're thinking about who you're talking to, it's best to use empathy, right? I use a tool called an empathy map to try to understand who your audience is. So you're going to build personas from this, and you might have several personas for one job, right? There might be 3 or 4 different types of worker or employee who does really well in that role. But starting with empathy, you want to try to understand, okay, so I'm going to hire this type of person. Now let's imagine who they are. What's their day like? Right? Do they still live at home with their parents? Are they parents themselves? Do they play football or do they coach football? Right? Are they a commuter or do they work from home? All of these things go into understanding who your audience is and who you're talking to. And then finally, you want to ask, all right, so what are their pain points? And how can we answer those with transparent and genuine benefits about working for our company in all of your messaging and communication? So when you build job ads, for instance, right, you generally have an option to A/B test or run several different versions. And so there should be one for each of your personas to understand, right, where you're going to get your traction. And the messaging should be slightly tweaked for each of them. So I'll give you an interesting example. Years ago, I was a talent acquisition leader at a company called CA Technologies. And we polled our workers around the world to find out what they thought was really interesting or good about working at this company, right? It's about a 10,000 person company. And a lot of people came back and said they love the fact that we had pet benefits. And we're like, okay, that wasn't on our list of things to communicate about. But it turned out they really liked that you could ask for a day off to socialize with your new pet. And so we actually started sending out little gift bags to new pet day off requesters that had to go through HR. So we get a signal and send them a little gift bag with some branded swag for their pet. And we put a postcard in there and said, hey, look, if you're going to post pictures on Instagram, tag us. We'd love to celebrate with you. Right. And then we would occasionally take one of those posts from these workers that started posting literally all around the world, lots of organic traffic, and sharing that on the company Instagram page and just celebrating the fact that, hey, Tatiana has a new pet and we're here to celebrate with her and Sparky. And it really worked. It really resonated with the audience that we were trying to attract because that audience was, very similar to our existing workforce.
Mm, it's a great example. It's a great example for me because it's how could we feel about candidates also they are humans. We are not just employees. They are the humans. Uh, could you give an advice for customizing? You talk about different type of profiles of our candidates or current employees. Could you give an advice? What is the best approach for preparing strategy? The balance on one side, customizing your message, and also focusing on your EVP. So that means from one side, we need to whole image, right understanding what company is about, and also make customization for meeting the people needs. What are the right balance for these?
So there's an interesting thing that happens when you start doing employer brand work for an organization, right? You immediately bump into brand marketing, right? So the proper marketing department in the organization has to supply you with the brand guidelines and with their version of what corporate advertising looks like. And sometimes you have to go through them as a gatekeeper in order to publish things or approve messaging. Well, great and interesting because your approach has to be, well, look, people attract people to the organization as much as messaging and products do. So if a company is perceived as being a good employer and has entertaining and interesting people who work for it, that feeling is as much of an attractor for customers as it is also for employees. So if you do a good job of your employer messaging, eventually marketing comes to you and says, hey, we really like what you're doing. We'd like a little piece of that ourselves. And that's where the magic starts to happen. But the key there is to ask your existing employees when you build that empathy map of who you're trying to attract and what they see, hear, think, and do, and what their pains and gains could be. Ask your existing employees to participate in that exercise. You know who they are, right? These are the people we're trying to attract, people very similar to this array of interesting people who do this job well. And so ask them, what's really important to you? What groups do you hang out in on Facebook or Reddit or wherever? And understand where they are, who they are, and what they want and what they're interested in. And that's where you really get into something that corporate marketing is going to say, wow, that's good stuff.
Uh, may I ask you if you could give recommendation about preparing the questions for the interview with your audience for preparing profiles? Could you share your most the most favorite questions or valuable questions, which usually helps you to open the people side of the employees. Usually we ask this question of the recruiters. What question do you like for understanding your candidates better? What are your favorite questions for open the persona or on the other side of your HR communication?
Yeah, so open-ended questions, right? Always. Don't give them a yes or a no question. Say, what interests you? What keeps you up at night? What are you passionate about? What drives you? What do you want? What do you want to do? Right? Those sort of open-ended questions are really good. You can do an interesting thing that I've seen start to happen with ChatGPT, for instance. So you can take a person's resume or profile and feed it to a ChatGPT and say, based on culture index, right? What types of questions would be good for this candidate to help engage with them? And you can actually build a profile for that specific candidate of things that will help them to understand that you're interested in them. And if you are going that extra mile to be interested in them, it shows.
My next question is about be honest. It's difficult in the corporate world to be really honest because from one side we want to show ourselves from the best side as employers. From the other side, we have a reality. For example, we have a huge workload, or maybe we have some unexpected meetings, or maybe some problems with clients and so on. What is the right balance? How could you recommend to manage the issues and balance between total honesty from one side and about building the right image? What is your recommendation? And also from the perspective from the HR manager and the situation when you engage your employees as ambassadors for promoting company.
So the best companies, right, do have an occasionally tough work environment, but are also very transparent about it. And the best interviews I've ever been in, whether it's for consulting work or employment, are ones where a manager says to you or a recruiter, this is a really great place to work. And people are, rabid fans of the employer and about working here. But it's not easy. It's tough. You have to work for it. But if you do, it's a very valuable payoff because there is really good work being done here, and being part of a community that really cares about the outcome and the product and the service is a reward in itself. And so that type of language really helps. So first say, yeah, this company is great and here's why. Then say, also, it's no picnic, right? And you really do want to be transparent. Now, if you've got a super easy work environment and this amazing work-life balance, okay, also say that, but most companies don't. I mean, let's be honest. Most companies have things that are tough and they're obvious. You can see them on Glassdoor and Indeed reviews. And so don't hide from that. Answer that straight on. Hey, great. Thanks for the feedback. We're working on it when it's online feedback. And when you're talking to a candidate, say, hey, you'll read about us that we've got some of these issues and we are working on them. But the reality is, if you put in the work, the reward is here. And, we'll compensate you for it, obviously. But the greater reward is in the camaraderie you build with management and employees, and the product that you're putting out in the world is something you can care about.
You previously you said, or people want to work with people, not only in the company but also the people.
Right.
And now the employee advocacy programs become more and more popular. What are your recommendations for companies who want to launch this type of programs? And but could you, which type of employees you could recommend to show engage in this program in different levels? Should we engage with top level? What are your recommendations for companies?
So very often I see companies putting their executives and managers on video. And that's fine. You do want to know who you're going to be working for, but the people who you would involve in that empathy map exercise, who are the people doing the job, that's also who I want to hear from, right? And so it's very important to have a balance there of not just the slick people who are good on camera, but also the everyday people who really are, involved in the day-to-day work. So you want to make sure that you've got a good balance of that. There's a platform that I'm an advisor to called Mahalo Hub, and you can see this QR code right behind me. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you to a place where you can answer questions about how your experience is with some things that I do. And employers can use this to ask their employees questions about, tell us about your experience in working here. And that's a really good idea, is to get your employees on video, just having real conversations. And that video goes to a library where it's indexed and tagged. And it's real easy for employers to show that on social media and on their websites. So that's mahalohub.com. And I like this. And the owners of Mahalo Hub previously made another product that got acquired by Symphony Talent that I implemented at CA Technologies with great success. And so it's video, it's quotes, but it's also when someone is hired, that's when they are most enthusiastic about their opportunity because, hey, they've just gotten a job, right? So at that time, send them a note and say, tell us about your experience, right? How was it? Was it hard? Was it worth it? Are you excited? How do you feel about what your contribution will be to your team? And when they write back with their answers, ask them if they wouldn't mind posting that to LinkedIn and or a review on Glassdoor or Indeed reviews, right? And absolutely, that's a great time to ask for that. And then don't just forget about it. Hit them up again at 3 months and say, how's it going now? And hit them up again at 6 months and a year and every quarter after that, right? To ensure that you're engaging with them and caring about how they're feeling about things.
Great advice. I think for all the companies to use their employees on a regular approach. My next question for you is about tone of voice. Because when we talk about companies, sometimes companies really worry to speak as a person. It's they have a joke what when you are on LinkedIn, you should speak like on a LinkedIn is as a special questions when you are very, very formal. But what are your recommendations for company? What is the best way to find your own tone of voice for your HR communication? And what you could do also in a situation when the voice of an employee, because they are the persons, could be a little bit different. What is your approach, tone of voice for the company?
So this is sort of a dichotomy between formal, right, and casual. And there's a whole lot in between. And my suggestion has always been to describe the personality of your company. And sometimes that's difficult. If you ask leaders, they'll say one thing. And if you ask regular employees, they'll say another. This gets to where you're starting to get into an EVP, right? A value proposition as an employer. What do you offer that's really great? But that's just part of it. Really, what is the personality of the company? That's what I really want to know. And so when you're going through any of those exercises, make sure you're asking people at all levels and take that all into account. And now with, LLM models, right? OpenAI, you can feed that information in and ask for, unbiased opinions. What's the personality of this organization? Look at all communications you can find from employees and the company, and give me an idea here. And you're going to get several ideas. And then you as a team have to decide, all right, we're going to skew this way or we're going to skew that way. But reality is, we're not a super formal company. We're a creative company. And that's kind of what we want to show. Now, if you're the world's largest bank, which I've done some work for quite a bit, your message is a little bit different. However, if you are still interested in your audience more than you are interested in talking about yourself, that's always a good rule of thumb. So, in your job descriptions, for instance, talk to the candidate first. You are this type of person. You like this kind of challenge. We are looking for people like you. Imagine what we could do together, right? So, if it's you first, you language first, that's always a good rule of thumb, formal or casual.
Great. I want to ask about also the corporate culture perspective. Usually, when we talk about HR marketing, we focused on EVP, employee value proposition, what we need to promote. But sometimes we forget about the culture. For example, as we discussed, in one company, I saw the communication in the company. For example, right, we are honest company. We are open for the people. We are like a family, but absolutely formal type of photos, formal type of communication. What is the best way for bringing your culture in your communications, and should it do it or not? And what is the best way to give potential candidate understanding about expectation of a company from the culture perspective?
So I have some built-in bias about this, and I'm just going to be honest. We all do. Everyone does. Employers, hiring managers, we all have some bias, and that's one thing that we have to remember. So if we're biased because we've got a budget and a project to complete and a job to do, and we just need to hire bodies to get it done at no matter what cost, well, that's a culture right there, right? But if we genuinely care about promoting people's growth and education and community activism and these types of things, that's a different culture. Now, usually the truth is in the middle. It's not all one or the other, right? So you have to be transparent and honest, because an employer's best form of communication is transparent. It's organic. It comes from the employees. And so when you are having those conversations with your workforce, what was it about this company that attracted you? And how do you feel now? Has it changed? What does it feel like to you now? And those feeling questions are really, really important, because on paper, you can say, well, we are this very transparent organization, but in reality, we want everyone back to work in the office 5 days a week. And, and if you don't like it, you can hit the road and you're fired. Right. So listen, there's a big debate right now. Return to office is happening. It's not going to go away. So we're going to have to accept that a little bit. But most companies are doing kind of a 3-day in the office thing. And that feels a little more open and transparent and easygoing than just a very rigid mentality. So my best suggestion there is be honest and transparent. You don't want to sell a bill of goods, right? That a candidate comes in and was told one thing and it's completely another, because that's going straight to your reviews for sure.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from my colleague from Brazil. It's very interesting because my next question will be about cross-cultural issues. We have different culture in different countries. A very interesting question from this perspective. Using personal experience from a candidate is in effect a very interesting approach. But how to do that without let them too uncomfortable? Could I make a short explanation? I think you have experience in that for our audience. For example, when you work in a culture like US, you could be honest. You could say right what you think. But in Brazil, it's very difficult. The people feel themselves uncomfortable to say straight what they really feel and think, and because the other side, they're not ready. It's another type of culture, and also a lot of Asian cultures. Also, it's not so straight. What could you answer to this question? How to save a great employee candidate experience from one side, but say them the real truth?
Right. So with global organizations, right, certainly there's going to be a regional, what I call a regional experience. And the reality is you're going to manage regionally, okay, anyway. So there's going to be a little different microculture in one region versus another. And in fact, I would break it down even farther than that. I would say that there's not one culture for any global organization at all. There's a different culture in the accounting department and in the IT department and in the sales department and in the customer service department. They're microcultures, right? And so be very cognizant of that. And your messaging, if you, okay, so gaudy Americans just say whatever they feel like, right? That's kind of the general global idea. And it's true. So don't be a gaudy American trampling all over the ideals of someone in South America, right? Or Japan or Singapore or UK. They're all different. And having been a global leader myself, you have to understand that as well, right? From the employer side, your people in UK are going to be different, right? They're going to be demanding, but more formal about it. They're going to give you sarcasm and backhanded compliments. Your people in Singapore and APAC are going to be noisy. They need things now, and also, right? You've got these regional differences with time zones and things like that. And so not everyone's on the same page at the same time of day. Sometimes people are cranky when they have to be on a 10 p.m. call, right? So understand these microcultures and play to their strengths. Say, hey, this is really cool because our company in Brazil is, slightly different. It's really cool. And here's why. And make sure that you're very open about that. And I would put that all over your careers page. Don't paint your company as just one thing, right? Have a different tab for every region and say, here's what it's like here, and have a video with a couple of the employees talking about their experience.
That's really great and a great approach. And my next question is for you as a perspective for a global employer brand manager. We have some situation when people could be responsible for the whole world. Um, we met because our friend Alex Herrig gave me a recommendation about you, and Alex for me is one of the brilliant person in the world of employer branding who manage globally employer brand of a GoDaddy. And I know a lot of any other people who, for example, when originally in one from working in one country, but they are responsible for the whole world. What strategy? And I know you also work globally, and which why my question for you: what strategy would you recommend for the newcomers in global employer branding for preparing for this position when you have to be when you have to manage employer brand globally in different countries with different cultures? What should you do and what you shouldn't do?
Right. So, okay, first of all, get your copy of the book Hiring Humans
It's great
at
advice.
hiring-humans.com. It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all the places you can get books. But then I've got a fun story. So when I got one of my early corporate employer brand jobs, and this was again at CA Technologies back in 2015, I was gifted with a 5-person global team of employer brand people, right? Content, social design, copywriting. And I mean, I was very fortunate to to have this global team. And so I was able to collaborate, right, about what's going to land well where. And again, one strategy doesn't and shouldn't cut it. And so if you've got a global team, you're not necessarily going to be able to get out in the field and go visit every office. I was eventually able to get to every office over a couple of years, but right out of the box, that's going to be tricky. So plan your meetings with members and build yourself an ERG of sorts, right? Where you can have lean in groups to talk about what the company's really like in each of those regions so you can get to know the different parts of the organization. And if you have manufacturing and logistics and different things that, very often those things don't communicate between parts of the organization very well. So you can be the glue there. You can be the one holding the rubber bands together from a communication standpoint, but you really want to get those people together talking as well. And when you do get people in a session together talking openly about, likes and dislikes, gripes and praise, it's pretty fun, but you also learn a lot. And so take notes. This is your informal EVP strategy, is just understanding first before you start to formalize anything.
Could you share maybe some of your professional experience when you met something unusual for you, maybe unpredictable when you work globally with companies from different countries? I think everybody, each of us who are globally at least once in our professional life, meet the situation when in the beginning you couldn't understand what happened, why they're going this way or that way. Could you share maybe any interesting stories from your professional experience and how you manage them?
So if you're thinking about your career, right, in this space, you've got to figure out what you lean towards. If you lean towards data, that's going to be more of an operations type of thing. Doesn't have to be, right? You could be like me and be creative and like data. There are those people. And so also, what are your choices, right? Do you really need structure? Do you want autonomy? Do you want to do some work for yourself? Do you want to be a leader of people? Or do you like to do implementation, right? Are you good at delivery? Do you want to work with customers, right? All of these things. It's just like you and I would recommend to any prospective job seeker, right? Where do you land? And I like to build quadrants. So quadrant one is a column that is, what are you good at, right? Quadrant two is, what do you like to do, right? Quadrant three is, what can you get paid to do that you've recently done that you also like to do? And that's a very short column. And that's where you should start thinking about your career path. And so if you're just getting started in this space, there are lots of options, right? You can go down the HRBP path. You can certainly go down the management path. You can be a specialist in employer branding for years now, because it's a real thing, and there are thousands of us out there. But when I started, there was not. There were very few, and we had to do everything. I was a sourcer. I was a recruiter. I was a leader. I was the data guy. I was all the things. And you have to choose. You have to specialize a little bit, but don't be afraid to also have expertise in those other areas, and then learn everything you can about the business. Ask the business, how do we make money? How many people do we need to fulfill the promises we've made to our existing customers? How many people do we currently employ? And what's our churn rate? Understanding these types of things help you to understand how to be a better partner to the business. And that's where talent acquisition and human resources really gets a seat at the table, by being a good business partner.
Mhm. Also, well, if we talk about the channels of communication, they could be different for different countries and work differently. The communications could work differently. And also, we have two types of communications, at least the recruitment communication, which we expect the call to action immediately. And also, sometimes we organize some events or some special promo campaign for employer branding. What could you advise to people on the employer brand management position or talent acquisition position? What is the best to have balance between recruitment and employer branding communication, and how to find appropriate channels? What type of metrics could you recommend for them to using? Because you, as you said, you are absolutely people oriented, but you like figures. And that I agree, but it's very important. What could you advise?
All right, so a couple of things there. I've got a couple answers here, and one is the type of mix that you're going to use to communicate. And I'm a big fan of what I call the 5-to-1 give to ask ratio. So whether you're doing recruitment marketing, which is apply to my job, or employer branding, hey, check out our company. Do this first before you just say, hey, look at me, or hey, please take action, or refer someone. Give to your audience 5 times. So you've done your empathy map, you understand who they are and what they need, and you've built your personas so you understand what channels they're on. If you're smart, right? You've already done this work before you start messaging anyone. So what is interesting to them? What is entertaining, funny, educational, helpful, or what would help them do their job during the day? 5 things, 5 gives to everyone ask. Oh, and oh, by the way, we're hiring, right? After you've already built trust in your community. So be a trusted partner, because no one that, look, you can go to anyone's career site and see their jobs. But if you really want to build an audience in a community, give a lot, right? Before you ask. So a lot of those employee stories that are talking about how they get their job done, how they landed their job, like all tips, helpful things, funny personal stories, hobbies, and any of those things are great. News items are good, not necessarily just company news. Not, hey, look at our CEO on the cover of Forbes, but here's some industry news that you might find helpful. And then when you're looking at the channels, it's fairly straightforward. If you're hiring corporate positions, LinkedIn is going to be a really good channel for you, of course, right? If you're hiring IT positions, Slack's going to be a good channel. All the Discords, Reddit, all the coding channels are going to be good. And also a lot of the creative channels are going to be good, as well as LinkedIn. So you've got a bigger variety of things that you need to cover. If you're hiring for blue collar or volume hiring, Meta is going to be great. And TikTok is really actually good for almost everyone. So you've got this all in. If you're not on TikTok, I think you're doing it wrong. But one other channel that I'll really recommend is sponsor podcasts. There are over 5,000 podcasts about careers just on Spotify. And so if you don't think people are going to Spotify or other podcast channels to look for work or hear about jobs and careers, you're wrong. And when you get someone listening to an ad on Spotify, they are a lot more likely to listen to the full ad, to be more engaged, and to take action than on other channels. And then finally, your catch-all for all your videos has to be YouTube. You have to nurture and build the content on that channel. Don't just, and you're doing it right now, right? Don't just leave it on LinkedIn and expect people to find you. YouTube's a much bigger channel than LinkedIn is.
It's very great advice. Also, my next question is about the perspective of a personal brand. I remember the times when in the past the companies prohibited employees, talent acquisition manager, employer brand manager to promote themselves.
That's right.
You should be you should work just as a part of the company, not like as a person. Now I see the global trends. What the situation is really changed, and if you are as a talent acquisition manager have your personal brand, strong reputation, it's easier for you to achieve your goals in recruitment and working for some particular company. What could you recommend to people from employer branding, talent acquisition industry, totally in HR, about being their personal brand? How should they do this? Should they do this or not? Because based on your experience and based on your professional expertise.
So I'd say the first thing to do when you're looking at your own personal brand is get your copy of the Paint Your Store book. You can also find that at hiring-humans.com, called Paint Your Store. It's a personal branding book. But you have to remember that you want to encourage your people who are going to be your brand ambassadors, that don't just talk about the company, right? Have three things about yourself that you find interesting that you're willing to share with the world. So, for me, I like travel and photography and my dog, and I've got three boys. So I've got a few things about myself that I kind of share on a regular basis. I'm a little bit of a sports nerd and, big data guy. So, right, I've got these things that aren't just look at me, but I'm sharing on other channels on a fairly regular basis. So beyond those three things, remember also, don't just post jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't just post the company's jobs. Use that 5-to-1 give to ask content ratio. And then also be consistent over time. If you're going to build your own brand and your own audience and community, don't bury your head once you get a job or get busy and only come up for air when you're looking for answers or your next gig, right? Be consistent over time, because your audience doesn't just go away when you get busy. They're still there. But if you're inconsistent, that says something about you. And if you're only surfacing when you need something, what kind of participant are you in their network? And so that's one thing. If you're going to teach your people about how to do it right, consistency over time is a big deal.
It's for me, it's really great when you help your employees to promote their personal brand. And my next question: how do you recommend to add your personal in your profile and in your life, in your professional life inside company and outside? It's very interesting observation from my side. When firstly I started working in Brazil and communicate with people here, I see what on LinkedIn, a lot of them, when in description, they are publish information what they are mother of Pedro, as I said, I'm a father of three sons. So we publish personal information, and this is important part of their lives, and we do this. I remember times when we said, I think 20, 25 years ago, it's just business, not personal. Now
Right.
I think the situation absolutely changed, and now we start to say all in the business is about personality, all is about be human. What are your recommendation? How I could find the best balance
Mhm.
between personal as a person and as a professional, and between professional side of our lives?
So if you think about places like LinkedIn, for instance, which is a good place to start, um, you know, one of the things I'm interested in as an employer are, what are people passionate about? Okay, so you can say I'm passionate about data, but I'm also passionate about dogs and travel and photography, like those things. That tells me something about you. It makes you a more well-rounded person, right, than a very flat profile with just a job title. And most of us are not going to be in the exact same job for the entire span of our careers, but those personal things do stay the same, right? And they may evolve, and you can add to them. And you may not always be into pickleball, right? But maybe for a couple of years you are, and that's just an interesting thing. Be well-rounded is my point, right? So talk a bit about business and a bit about your personal stuff so that people get to understand that you're not exactly the same as the next Java developer that comes along. There's something special and interesting about you. And that's very, very important, because when it comes down to those traits, as we talked about before, that make you different and interesting, because everybody's got this algorithm aligned resume now. Well, it's those personal passions and those personal touches and contextual information that are going to change the game at the end of the day, because AI will start to recognize those things versus just the taxonomy of skills that will come down to deciding, who's more real and who's more human.
Uh, Craig, time is coming so fast. It was really great and insightful dialogue, and I want to say you thanks from our audience who said it's thanks for using empathy methods. They're very useful tool, and you got a lot of tips. But in the end, I have usual questions for all my guests about three main tips. Which could you give to the audience who want to start hiring humans? One additional tips from me first, it's buy your book, Hiring Humans. But after that, three main tips which helps our people from our audience hiring humans in the future.
All right. Tip number one, we are all colleagues, right? We're all doing the same kind of work. We're all basically working for the same companies. If you're in this business for very long, if you've ever been a recruiter or a consultant in staffing or things like that, you work for a bunch of the same organizations as most of the other people that you ever meet. And there's a finite number of types of companies. So we're all in this together. We're all colleagues. And if you're suddenly unemployed, does that make you suddenly not my colleague? Certainly not. So why would you treat job seekers any differently than somebody that you feel that kinship with, that you're a colleague together in this? You shouldn't. So start with the empathy. They're your colleague. They're not just a job candidate. There's tip number one. Tip number two, have three things that are interesting about you that aren't about work that you can share with the world on a regular basis. If it's about your kids, you don't necessarily have to name your kids in order to share things about them. My kids started out online with me as number one, number two, and number three sons. And so I didn't share their names, right? I was a little safe about their security until they got old enough to want their names out there. So definitely have three things about yourself that you can share. And then three is, when you're posting content, use that 5-to-1 give to ask content ratio. So 5 gives for every 1 ask. That ratio also works, by the way, in personal relationships and business relationships. It's the 80-20 principle, and it's very well proven. Norman Vincent Peale wrote a book about it. So the 5-to-1 give to ask content ratio is my final tip. And then lastly, listen to more of Tatiana's podcasts. They're great.
Thanks a lot, Craig. Thanks a lot. Thanks to all who participate our podcast online and live in our live stream on LinkedIn. And also thanks a lot to all other people who will watch this video later on our YouTube channel. This is podcast Happy at Work. My name is Tatiana Kowal, and our guest today was Craig Fisher, and my strong recommendation to follow him, at least on LinkedIn, because it gives you a lot of insights. And please read his book and have a lot of inspiration for the future. This is podcast Happy at Work. My name is Tatiana Kowal. Stay tuned.